welcome to the Hunt Backcountry Podcast, presented by Exo Mtn Gear. This podcast and the gear that we produce at Exo Mtn Gear share the same purpose: to make you a more capable, confident, and successful backcountry hunter. This show is all about providing you with valuable information from experienced hunters. To learn more about the podcast or about our backcountry hunting packs, visit exomtngear.com. Well, welcome to episode 175. I'm very excited about this episode because the topic is all new to me, and I love learning new things. Hopefully you're in a similar position here. The topic is pack rafts. So we talk with the owner of backcountrypackrafts.com about what a pack raft is, how they can be used, and how they might benefit you for your hunting. It's a fascinating topic. It opens up some new possibilities and new ideas that I'm excited for you guys to hear about. So Matt from backcountrypackrafts.com offers rentals, which you'll hear a little bit about, and he has a discount code just for you guys. So if you're ever interested in renting a pack raft from Matt, use the coupon code HUNTBC15. So Hunt Backcountry, HUNTBC15, and you can get 15% off of your rental. Before we dive into this discussion with Matt, I wanted to thank Jordan for the podcast feedback. Jordan says, "What I thought could only be possible via a once-in-a-lifetime guided hunt now seems far more approachable as a DIY hunt thanks to this podcast." Guys, can't say it any better. That's what we're about. We want to equip you guys, prepare you guys, give you the information you need to help you realize that what you want to do is possible. So if you have any ideas, any questions on that, how can your hunt happen? What do you need to do to prepare for your hunt? Anything like that, let us know. Send us an email to podcast@exomtngear.com. We will discuss that on a future episode for you guys. Also in this month, May of 2019, we have a giveaway from Onyx Maps as well as Ivory Holsters. So you can win a subscription to Onyx or a custom holster from Ivory Holsters. Go check that out. Get entered. You have about a week or so left. Go to exomtngear.com/podcast. Hit the giveaway link. It only takes a second to enter. Okay, let's dive into this episode and discuss pack rafts for hunting. Matt, welcome to the Hunt Backcountry Podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, excited to chat with you. We'll get into more on pack rafts. That's the topic of the day, and you have some experience there. But before we even get into that, just kind of give us some personal background context so listeners can get to know you a little bit.
Sure. So I'm born and raised Montana. I grew up kind of on a ranch, hunting and fishing there, mostly rifle hunting. And then the fall after I graduated from high school, I kind of got introduced to backcountry hunting. My buddy and I went to Alaska for like 6 weeks and hunted everything you could buy an over-the-counter tag for, and kind of got our butts kicked. So yeah, that was kind of my introduction to backcountry hunting. And then shortly after that, I kind of got hooked on archery elk and have hunted a lot of that. And then I guess that's kind of my hunting background.
Dude, 6 weeks in Alaska right out of school. That's awesome, man.
Yeah. It was, it's kind of one of those, like, if I'd known what I know now, it would have been even more fun, but it was definitely an adventure. I shot a caribou like 7 miles from the road across tundra. And I thought I was going to die we were on the tundra for like 21 hours and kind of crazy.
Oh goodness, man. Did you, have any other tags filled besides that caribou, or that was essentially it?
No, just the caribou. That was like one of the things, like research wise, like now, like it's way harder to shoot a moose that, meets the standard that you have to meet if you're not a non-resident. And then,
right.
I guess we could have shot a bear, but we pretty much treated it with a truck on a road. So we didn't feel very ethical about that. So,
wow, dude, what an adventure. I wish that was like more on my radar to do that when I first got out of school. Just take that time and get it done.
Right. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. So, we'll get into pack rafts more, but I'm curious, did you guys do a pack raft at all on that trip, or is this kind of road hunting and covering ground on foot?
Yeah, I was just road hunting and covering ground on foot. I really didn't learn about pack rafts until like 6 or 7 years ago. They're kind of born in Alaska, just because of the terrain that they have there, and the lack of roads, and they have a lot of rivers, so it kind of all works together. But
yeah,
we didn't use pack rafts on that trip.
So pack rafts, maybe something guy conceptually knows what it is. Maybe there's some guys who've never heard of it. I mean, it is what it says. It's a raft that's packable, but kind of give us like, at least from a for idiots 101 on what a pack raft is. You mentioned kind of a little bit on why they're used, their origins, like kind of just lay some context and history for what they are before we dive deeper into them. Yeah,
so I think maybe like 25 years ago or so, something like that, there's a lady up in Alaska, and her son was just like this crazy. He would just do all these trips where he'd traverse huge stretches of the Brooks Range, and he basically had like glorified pool toys. And he would come back from these trips, and they were like duct taped and all kinds of, like, he'd just get holes all the time. And she's just like, I think I can make a better raft. And so that's kind of, it depends on who you ask, but that's kind of like the modern pack raft, where it started. And so she started Alpaca Rafts, which is kind of the premier pack raft. But yeah, it's basically a raft that packs down. Depends on the model, obviously, but most of them pack down to like the size of like a bigger 2-man backpacking tent. So like 20 by 7 by 7. And then most of them weigh under 10 pounds. A lot of them weigh closer to like 6. And yeah, so you can hike in the backcountry and float out. And then most of them are pretty capable of some decent whitewater. You can do usually class 2, class 3 with them, or sometimes more.
Yeah, man, I'd love to geek out on specs here in a little bit, but like talk about pack rafts if a guy is not up in Alaska, maybe even lower 48 here. I think there's a lot of like we can say unexplored opportunity for what pack rafts might do for a guy even here in the lower 48. So when it comes to hunting specifically, like what are some of the use cases, benefits, what opportunities could using a pack raft open up for guys?
Yeah, so it's definitely one of those things you want to think about it. It's like, it's something to have it's probably not something you're going to do all the time, but it really opens up a couple opportunities. So the most obvious one is like situations where you're hunting up a creek or a river, and then floating out, or like hunting around to a river, to where you can put in and then floating out. So that's the most obvious one. 'Cause then, if you shoot something, you can just float out rather than pack out. And then I guess another one would be like if you want to do this float trip, but at the end of it, there's like a, 3 or 5 mile pack out. And you're like, well, I'm not going to pack this, whatever, my drift boat or, a 40-pound raft out. But if I have a pack raft, I can pack it out 3 miles, no problem. And then go back one more trip for, if I shoot something. So that'd be another one. And then, then like kind of a base camp. Like, so if you hike up a river, drop your camp there and then kind of hunt out of that area, and then float out, if you shoot some, or, whether you're successful or not. That would be the 3 ways to use them, I think.
I mean, I think if you had a pack raft, or for guys, maybe it's not a pack raft, but maybe just opening up this idea of using watercraft. I mean, if there's some opportunities of public land, sometimes even landlocked land. I mean, I think it just opens up way more possibilities on where you can hunt if you're willing to kind of get on the water.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So if you put in at somewhere, you can float to where you just put in at a bridge or something like that, and then you can float to where you can hunt, and then you can float out of there. Definitely can open up some public land opportunities. Yeah,
that's cool, man. So you mentioned being able to float something out versus pack something out. So talk about like what's a weight capacity on one of these pack rafts, because especially for hunting, you have this situation where you got yourself, probably a decent amount of gear in terms of weapon, maybe packing camp, that type of thing, and then you talk about packing out an animal. So what's a weight capacity looking like across different models of pack rafts?
So yeah, I mean, it ranges depending on the model. I guess like 300 pounds total would be on the low end, and then there's a couple, like Alpaca makes one, and then there's a Pristine Ventures out of Alaska that makes one where it's closer to 1,000. Yeah, it really varies, I guess. For the single person rafts, kind of the upper end is like 500. The Alpaca Mule can do 500. And I should say too, one thing about their design, people always ask me like, well, I have a really heavy pack, so I think I need a bigger pack raft. Well, they're designed to have weight on the front, so because you're sitting in the back or more towards the back, and so they're designed to have your pack on the front, and like kind of with the assumption that your pack is going to be like 50, 60 pounds. So when you add, you can add more weight to that, obviously. And then the thing that really kind of opens up load capacity is there's this thing called cargo fly or in-tube storage. So basically on the back of the boat, it zips open, and there's this zipper that's waterproof, and you can put in dry bags, and they can offset even more the weight on the front of the boat, and it makes it more stable.
So there's storage within, I'm like not watercraft literate here, but let's say like within the inflatable section, within the quote unquote like pontoon, if you will, there's storage within that on some models?
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
Okay. Interesting. Gotcha. So, and then like, let's say that 500 pound one, I know you mentioned kind of in brief, like these are maybe 6 to 10 pounds, maybe the size of like a 2-man tent, that type of thing. But say that's like a solo guy looking at, did you say it was the Alpaca Mule? That's like a 500-ish pound capacity. So what, like, does that one specifically, just as an example, because that sounds like a decent like weight range if you figure a 200 pound guy, gear, and then plenty of, capacity for meat. So what does that one specifically kind of pack down to? What does it weigh?
Yeah, so that one would be, I mean, it depends a little bit on like what you do for spray skirt options, because there's a couple different options there, but it would probably be like maybe 8 by 8 by, like 20, 21 inches. It would pack down to about that size. And it would weigh, if you had like the cruiser spray skirt, which is kind of like the, I guess the standard, I'd say, it would weigh about 8 pounds, 5 ounces with that cargo fly. And then your dry bags would be on top of that.
I first heard of these, I was only thinking of situations where you're putting in like right at the water, you're not actually packing this raft along. But then you look at other opportunities, you think about Alaska, like sometimes you're covering ground on foot first, then you get to a body of water that you either have to cross or navigate or what have you. So I mean, it sounds like these are truly pretty packable. I mean, don't get me wrong, 8 pounds is 8 pounds, and it's a lot in context of keeping a lightweight gear list, but compared to the capability that it gives you, it's pretty dang impressive. Yeah,
no, it can definitely be a game changer. And then Alpaca just came out with a new one, I think last year. It's called the Caribou, and it doesn't have it's an open boat, so there's no spray skirt. So if you do get water in there, you have to pull over and dump it out. But it's 5 pounds with a cargo fly. So, they built it out a little more different materials, which is why it's lighter. But that one is designed for having a big load on your front too. So I think that one's capacity is 400. But like that would be a pretty good option if you were going a little bit lighter.
So let me ask a really stupid question. How are you inflating these in the field? Is there like a foot pump system, bag system? What does that look like?
Right. Yeah. So it's not a stupid question. That definitely a lot of people wonder about that. So it is a bag pump. So basically you shake out this bag and then put your forearm over it and kind of just force the air through the nozzle. There's a nozzle that you screw onto the pack raft. And if you Google pack raft inflation or Alpaca raft inflation, the lady that started that company, she's like in her 70s now, and she inflates a pack raft in like 2 minutes. So it's once you get the hang of it, it's really, really easy.
Wow. So you mentioned some of these can even handle some white water, like some class 2, maybe class 3 stuff. How do they do in shallow water as well?
Really good, actually. That's kind of that's probably one of the biggest reasons they're used in the lower 48 for like, backcountry fishing trips and that sort of thing, because they can go. I mean, you need about 4, maybe 6 inches of water to get by. So they can go. You don't need nearly as much water as you would for like a regular raft or a drift boat or something like that.
And then in terms of maneuverability, and obviously this depends on your load and how it's loaded and all that, but I'm just thinking of quite a few guys who might potentially be interested in these and maybe don't have a ton of experience with rafts or shoot with boats or kayaks or like any sort of watercraft. Like, are they pretty stable, pretty easy maneuver, pretty easy to kind of get the hang of? Yeah,
definitely. And I should say I didn't like grow up, boating every weekend or anything like that. I came into this like pretty much, I wanted to do it because there's some backcountry fishing areas that I really wanted to get into, but I really didn't know much about rafting or whitewater or anything like that. And I got one and did, a trip that had some class 2 water on it and did just fine. So it's really, they're pretty hard to tip, honestly. Like, you have to be doing some pretty intense water or actually try to tip one. They're really stable, especially compared to like a whitewater kayak or something like that. So yeah, they're pretty beginner friendly, I'd say.
Cool. You mentioned spray skirts, things like that. So again, for guys who are new, like talk about what that is and then tie this into the whole, I would say, like safety issue of thinking of colder weather hunts and water exposure and all that. So like talk us about like, what are these skirts? How can a guy stay dry, stay safe, all that good stuff?
So I mean, yeah, if you're hunting in the fall, the big risk is hypothermia if you're in the water. So I would kind of advocate for at least some kind of spray skirt on there, unless the weather's going to be great or whatever. But so there's 2 types of spray skirts. It's called a cruiser spray skirt, and so that one kind of zips around your waist, and there's a Velcro strip along one side of the raft. And that one's easier to get in and out of, but it's supposed to keep out like 90% of the water. And then there's a whitewater one where there's a deck that's attached to the raft, and then there's your spray skirt like goes over your shoulders and then tucks into that deck, and that one's supposed to keep out like 95% of the water. So it kind of depends if you know you're going to be getting in and out a lot. The cruiser one is probably a better one, but if you know you're going to be in some really intense whitewater, the whitewater spray skirt is maybe the better one. They also make self bailers, so the water comes in, goes out through holes in the sides, in the bottom. But I think for the fall or winter, you wouldn't want to do that unless you had a dry suit, and then you're adding more weight. So, kind of my thought for hunting is probably either the whitewater spray skirt or the cruiser spray skirt, and then if you have a decent rain jacket, that kind of covers most of your bases as far as getting wet and cold.
Are there certain models of pack rafts that only are compatible with a certain type of skirt, or do most of them like pretty universally you can choose either skirt option with that pack raft model?
There are a few, like that ultralight caribou one that I mentioned. That one doesn't have any skirts as an option, but like the mule has all of those options. And then it kind of differs. I mean, those are both alpaca rafts, but it kind of varies by brand after that.
Size, we kind of covered. Weight capacity is a consideration. Gear storage is a consideration. The protection, your spray skirt. Like, what else goes into looking at pack rafts and kind of figuring out, like, maybe which one to choose, which one's right for you? Just things to know about selecting a pack raft.
Well, height is a big one. So, like, normally if somebody calls and wants to rent a raft from me, that's the first question I ask is their height. If you want to really drill down your sit length, so like kind of if you sit against the wall, like measuring from the wall to your leg, and then you can kind of size yourself based off that. But there's kind of different sets of or different sizes of pack rafts that are good for different heights of people. But if you're going to for sure use it for hunting, like the mule it's made for taller people, but because it's longer and bigger, it works better for hunting even if you're shorter. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I'm sure you're just gonna have more space to put that pack up front and everything else.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. When it comes to your pack, or say you're even loading out meat, things like that, are you lashing that down? Like, do you want that tied down? Is it pretty fine just sitting in? You mentioned they're stable. They're kind of hard to tip. Like, how particular do you have to be there about loading gear and keeping that secure?
I would definitely lash it down. If you're one of the most dangerous points as far as like tipping your load is actually getting in and out, because your weight's not offset, or the front end is not offset until you like get in. So it kind of like the whole raft leans forward, and especially if you're getting in and there's like some rapids, you're not getting in a pool that's like calm. I've done it, and I've seen other people do it where they're kind of unstable as they're getting in, and then they like tip up part of their pack into the water. So I would definitely lash it down, because you never know when it's gonna somehow it could tip or what have you. But lashing it down, and it because with the way the two spray skirts work, there's kind of an area, so you typically lash it down on top. So that way, like if you have a pack, and you don't want stuff in it to get wet, if water comes over the front of the boat, it'll just like go down around it, rather than sitting in the bottom and sitting in water. Obviously,
they're built for use, and even you think of up in Alaska and like rocks and different rivers. You mentioned a little bit of whitewater, so they don't sound like they're too dainty, but in terms of if you have to make some sort of in-field repair, I'm assuming these things come with like a repair kit. What does that look like, and how often on a typical basis would that be something that you'd be concerned with?
So they do all come with repair kits. It has it's called Patch and Go. It's kind of like tenacious tape, something like that. And actually people use Tyvek tape pretty regularly too. And then there's a substance called Aqua Seal. And so those are the two main things in the repair kit. But typically, like what you're going to see, like you can poke holes in the tube, but that's fairly rare. But the most typical repair you have to do in the field would be a hole in the floor. And so it usually like pinholes, just enough to like over the course of the day, you're going to get a little more and more water in the boat through the floor. So you can just flip the boat over and put some Aqua Seal on it. It's best if you can have it dry overnight, but I think in certain circumstances you can have it dry for like 4 hours. So I mean, I've done this this will be my 5th season. I've never had a boat come back that somebody walked out because it was unrepairable in the field. So that's, and I don't think I've even ever had like a major tube hole like that was more than probably 1/4 of an inch. So they are really tough. And the patch kit that you get with it is more than capable of fixing pretty much everything you need to in the field. So.
Okay, cool, man. Obviously going along, you're talking about being on the water with this craft. Beyond the raft, you're going to need some sort of PFD and paddle. Is that something that you provide with a rental, or is that something that someone sources on their own? You're just providing the raft. How does that work?
Yeah, so I rent those separately, but I do rent a lot of them, especially paddles. You can get by with a kayak paddle if the Packraft paddles are a little shorter. So that's kind of why I rent them separately. And then if you want to cut more weight, you can cut weight on a paddle. I think mine weigh a little over 2 pounds, but they're kind of made to be a little more durable. So you could probably get down to like 1.5 pounds if you wanted to cut some weight. And then life jackets, that's it really depends on the water you're doing. If you're doing more whitewater, you probably want one, just kind of a standard life vest that goes over your, that you would normally use for whitewater, I guess. And those are the kind that I rent. But if you were only gonna cross a river, or you knew you were gonna be on a lake, you can get those. They basically they're like a ripcord, and you just pull the ripcord and it inflates. So if something happened to you, or you're incapacitated or whatever, you could just pull the cord, and so that covers you as far as like, yeah, you technically have a life jacket if you're on a lake, and it's a lot lighter. So that's kind of the advantage of that style.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about buying and renting. Like first, just curious, like what are these things running? And again, we're talking about different models, different sizes, all that good stuff. But like, give us a ballpark on purchasing something like one of your more popular models that you tend to rent out a lot or recommend for hunters.
Yeah. So like that mule, I was kind of talking about it would be about $1,200 new. And then the caribou, that would be like the more ultralight, with that weighs 5 pounds. That one's about 800. And yeah, so you can, and those are again both alpacas, but there's a couple other brands out there, Cocopelli. They're a little bit cheaper. And then there's a pretty vibrant used market out there too. If you go on packrafting.org, and then there's a Facebook buy sell page too. So, and a lot of those guys, those rafts are, in pretty good shape still. And then I sell used ones at the end of the season as well. So there's a few different ways to cut the cost. If a little over $1,000 seems like too much to get into, you can probably get down to 700.
Right. Yeah. I've been imagining and even thinking of my own use case that this would be something I wouldn't even use every year necessarily, but just for a certain trip. And so that's where I think renting like is really a beneficial option. So like talk us through what you have to offer with a rental, how it's structured, like some ideas on pricing and how that works for your process.
Yeah. So I kind of try to make it so you'd pay about a fifth of what you pay for a new raft, on average for a rental. And of course I've quite a few different models. So it obviously depends on the model, because different ones rent different rates per day. But basically, trips of 7 and more days, I rent them my kind of standard line of rafts, 25 a day. And then it as the number of days shorten, the price per day goes up. And then you only pay for full days the raft is in your possession. So if I ship it to you it arrives on Monday, you don't pay for Monday, you pay starting Tuesday. And then if you would normally ship it back on a weekend, but you can't ship it back because it's a weekend, I give you the weekend days too. So I try to be pretty comfortable, like as if you were just walking into a rental store and picking them up. I should say that I ship like 90% of my rafts. So I ship them to people, they use them, and then they ship them back to me. So that's kind of how my business works. Yeah.
And then I guess shipping would be on top of like that daily fee.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And it goes, it's like $40 a raft for round trip shipping. And then it just goes up a little bit to add one. So that's for one raft. And then for two, it's like $50 round trip shipping. And yes, because they're packable, right? You can obviously ship them. And so that's, it ends up not being a huge percentage of your rental fee, the shipping.
Okay. So something like the mule, that you've mentioned a few times here, if you're doing a 7-day hunt, that's like about $25 a day.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool, man. And then you mentioned before a one-man raft. I wasn't even aware, like at least for pack rafts, that there was 2-man options. Talk us through what's available there. And I'm also thinking, again, you get 2 big dudes or regular size guys in a pack raft, and do they have models that are, still have room for 2 guys plus gear plus packing something out? Or is it better if you and a buddy just like each get a mule type thing? Or is there any benefit to one raft for 2 guys in gear, or just each have your own?
That's a good question. I hadn't thought of that. I think weight wise, I guess you probably would be better just having 2. But a lot of the 2-person ones can be paddled as one. So that'd be kind of the other way. Like if you were moose hunting, I guess.
Right. You needed more capacity.
Yeah. I think it would kind of depend on the trip, but the alpaca has this one called the forager, and then the the Pristine Ventures in Alaska has a pretty similar one, and their alpacas weighs like 13 pounds, and the other one's like 15 pounds. And you can haul 1,000 pounds in it. So I think you could make the case that it'd be better to have that one versus two-person ones, because then you probably would only have to have one paddle. So.
What other, just like from your personal use or feedback you get from clients using them, like what little tips and tricks and like things to know, or maybe you just even have like a standard list of stuff you tell people that are new pack rafts, but anything we kind of haven't covered just about using them. Yeah, just anything that comes to mind in terms of things that could be helpful for guys using these.
Yeah, so you definitely want a dry bag for like the stuff that like absolutely can't get wet, because if you tip, everything's wet, and then especially like if you tip during hunting season and your dry clothes are wet, you can get in some really bad situations. So even if you don't have a dry bag to put everything in, if you have like, a change of clothes, your stove, anything else that can't get wet, you definitely want to have a dry bag. And a lot of times you can line your pack with a dry bag or a garbage bag. That can kind of be a cheap way to do that too. The other thing, like, if you have like kind of a throw cord or at least some sort of P cord tied to the back of the raft, that way, like when you're getting in and out, you can just hold the P cord if you're getting stuff ready, so the raft doesn't drift away from you. Trying to think what else. I should mention there's a bunch of lash points. I think I should have mentioned that earlier with strapping stuff down. So definitely bring a lot of rope to tie stuff down or cord. I'm trying to think. Those are kind of, it's
all pretty basic, points. Right?
Yeah.
Do you ever run into questions on, you're packing out game on just keeping meat dry? Obviously it depends on the conditions, right? Like, but do you recommend guys cover meat? Is it typically okay just to leave it in a standard game bag because it's not going to get that wet? Is there anything to kind of know there about, just having meat on the river, if you will?
I don't think so. I've had guys ask if you could like drag it behind you, and I don't think that would be a good idea, but I think, as long as it's in a it's probably fine to be in a game bag, and then if it's in your pack, it shouldn't get wet. Or if you could put it in your in-tube storage, and then it for sure wouldn't get wet. So I don't think there's like a lot of danger in it getting wet, or at least like soaked, as long as you don't leave it in the bottom of your raft and take in a lot of water. So.
Yeah, and have it soaking. Yeah.
Right.
Cool. Any fun stories from your own use of a pack raft, or kind of wild stuff that maybe happened to a client or something like that?
Like as far as hunting goes, or as far as just rafts in general?
Yeah, either way. I just didn't know everything came to mind.
Oh yeah, so I had this family go down the Escalante 2 years ago, and they went over this rapid that kind of took them by surprise, and it was a couple and teenage daughters, and one of them lost a paddle, and then so they weren't sure what to do, so they like camped there for the night, and then in southern Utah, the water levels can change like crazy fast because of the melting and the rain. And so they basically got stranded, and the water levels kept rising, and they were like cliffed out, or, they couldn't go up because it was cliffs. And this helicopter that was looking for another kayaker ended up helicoptering them out. And then they like were on Good Morning America. And
oh my goodness.
It was kind of a crazy deal. But yeah, that's kind of the craziest client story. And then I think it was like the second year I had them, I really wanted to like test out how you could use them for hunting. And I drew this like access tag not too far from where I live for deer. And I hiked up and I shot this deer, and I wanted to see if you could float it out whole. And you can, but it's pretty scary, like getting in and out of the raft, because it's pretty easy it's just very awkward to have like a deer on your raft hole. and I came around the corner to like where my truck was parked, and there's these other hunters, and they were just like, their jaw was dropped because they're like, what are you doing? Like, I didn't even know that was possible. But yeah, so those are kind of my.
Awesome. Where can, if listeners want to check out what you have to offer in terms of rentals, where can they check out your stuff, or maybe what's just some other good resources if guys just are curious now about learning more about pack rafts that you would have them go check out?
Yeah, Backcountry Pack Rafts is my website. So it's just backcountrypackrafts.com. So yeah, all my rafts are there. Alpaca has a pretty good, like some educational stuff. So if you go to alpacarafts.com, you can find more stuff there on just kind of general pack raft knowledge. And then the packrafting.org, that has a lot of forums and stuff like that. Yeah, it'd be a good resource for beginners. And if you wanted to do a trip or something like that, they have trip forums there too.
Oh, nice, man. Awesome. Well, we appreciate the time, and yeah, exciting to think about, what a pack raft could do just to open up some new opportunities for guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Don't forget the discount code if you ever want to do that pack raft rental. It's HuntBC15, and that's at backcountrypackrafts.com. Also, head over to exomountgear.com/podcast and enter the giveaway for this month. While you're over there, hit that subscribe button to make sure you receive future episodes. We will catch you next time.